bringing you the best music from home studios across the world. This is TAETRO Radio.
What's going on, everybody? This is TAETRO back again with episode 5 of the TAETRO Radio podcast, the podcast that features 4 home studio producers per week. Really sorry for the delay between episodes, but work had me extremely busy this week. Luckily, today was a snow day, so I have plenty of time to record episode 5. We're going to kick things off right away with artist Fluorish. This track is called What You Mean to Me. Let's listen. Okay, that was Fluorish with What You Mean to Me. Fluorish writes about the track, "It's my first time ever chopping vocals. I took them from an acapella off of YouTube. I used FL Studio's Slicer and it turned out okay. As for synths, I used Silent 1 and Harmless for the main synths, as well as Massive for the bass." Then Fluorish goes on to talk about how the mix isn't final, and he's still going through the mixing process and says, but he thinks he turned out okay. And I agree, I think it turned out really great. You've got a really clean sound here. Fluorish also writes, "The intro noise is actually a saw blade I recorded through an old mic from the late 50s and put through a lot of processing to give it a whole sound." That's a really cool idea, and it comes across really well. It's also going to be my first bit of feedback. So that intro is really great because it's that super unique sound, and I love that you used that field recording technique to get it, but that's kind of the only spot it really happens. We do hear it a little later, kind of accenting the offbeats like you've got it sidechained. I would have used it in a more thematic way because I think you can create an entire B section to this song using that saw. And I would encourage you to at least have one section of the track where the vocal samples drop out. It was your first time chopping vocals and you did a really great job. But we don't want that all the way through the track. And if you do want it all the way through the track, I would at least pitch them down an octave or pitch them up an octave for at least one section to give us some variation. Or else, even though the track is changing and it's not super repetitive, those vocal samples just make it seem repetitive. I would also take a little bit of time and tailor some of your velocities, especially the tambourine sample that happens in certain sections. It's very stagnant. The rhythm is interesting. It just sounds too machine-like because it's a constant velocity. So I would play with that to make it sound a little bit more human and less rigid. The nice thing about this track is it gives off a really cool, positive vibe, and it's very musically pleasing to listen to. So other than the things I just mentioned with the velocities and with the vocal samples, we can just fix a few technical things to really notch it up, to really bring it up to the next level. For instance, you could do a little bit more with side chaining so your kick knocks a bit more. And you could do this to one of the synths, either Silent or even the bass. The track doesn't really hit me hard enough. So I think through side chaining, and if you do a little bit more EQing with your bass, you could get it to knock really hard and really hit a person's chest like you want it to. Your bass sound is also very simple, which I usually like simplicity. I would add a little bit more grit to it, maybe a saturator, maybe slight overdrive, and then sweep out those frequencies that are lower than 50K because they might be mudding up the mix a little bit. But if you add a little presence to that bass through a saturator or a little bit of overdrive, it's gonna make that hit harder, like I said before. This was a really great track, Fluorish. It really made me feel like I wanted to be back on the beach and on vacation in Florida. Thank you so much for the submission. Next up, we have Push 92 with a remix of his friend's track called Naufrago. Let's listen.
You're listening to TAETRO Radio.
Okay, that was Push 92's remix of Naufrago. Great work, Push 92. Push 92's real name is Sebastian from Bogota, Colombia. He's a DJ slash producer. He mainly produces house, techno, and some progressive music. Sebastian says the song is very organic from my point of view because the original song was produced with analog synths. For the remix, I sped up the tempo a little from the original, and I put some reverbs and delays on the original melody. I duplicate the vocals and modify the pitch to make them more deep. Also, I add some percussion because I think the original was quite simple. Finally, I put another bass line using the VST MS-20 from Korg. I work with FL Studio. 2 FL Studio tracks in a row. Really great tune, Push 92. I'm not going to critique too much on the musical ideas here because it is a remix, but I really think that the track overall kept me listening through beginning to end, and it's one of those tunes that can really put you in a trance as you listen to it. What is really successful in this track is the use of subtlety. So there are a couple big themes on synths, and then there are a couple really subtle things that fade in and out, whether it's little samples in the background, percussion, risers, the vocal samples are really subtle. Also, just the rhythmic elements can be super subtle. So something that's been happening for maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds will creep in, and things will start to drop out, and all of a sudden you'll hear this new rhythmic element that's actually been happening already. So really great job working with the subtlety of the track and maintaining that. Also, great work with speeding the tune up. I really can't stand a lot of remixes that slow a track down, because to me that's not what a remix is about. I like to put more energy into a track rather than subtract energy, but that's just my preference. And I think you did it well here. And I think you're totally right to say that this is an organic sounding track, because that was the first thing that I was thinking as I was listening to it. And I think it's really interesting that when we use the word organic, it usually means like comes from something living or something breathing. And this is a track made with analog synthesizers, and it's so interesting that we relate gear that is analog to organic because of the digital world we live in now, where everything is in the box. And we have these living, breathing machines now, and we have these living, breathing machines that are sort of refreshing to listen to now that we've all been listening to, you know, all the music that's been created in the box lately. So I just think that's an interesting concept. Anyway, Push 92, thanks so much for this submission. This is one of my favorite tracks that has been on the podcast so far. Next up, we are going to feature a track called I Don't Love You Anymore by a producer named Raffz Vieira. Let's listen.
Okay. A little bit different. Goodbye. I don't love you anymore.
that was I Don't Love You Anymore by Raffz Vieira. I feel a lot of things about this track, and the only description I got from Raffz was its genre is chill/future. Now, when I listen to this track, I think about this sort of emerging genre that I'm hearing a lot about lately that I don't fully understand, but I feel like this is it to a T, and that is vaporwave. You know, vaporwave has this sort of romantic but retro vibe to it without being too retro. Usually in electronic music that means referencing the 80s, but this is a little bit more early 90s harkening back to. And this just to me epitomizes what everybody's talking about with this new vaporwave movement. So I'm not sure if that's a point of reference for you, Raffz, but if not, you should check out what I mean, because it really fits that genre and style really well. Your structure is great, and it just kept me listening all the way through, especially with the introduction of the guitar, which I really didn't expect. Not only did you introduce that as this new exciting element, but it plays a really memorable melodic riff, and it keeps the listener entertained because they can have something that they remember and that they can come back to. Also, really good use of the voices. I'm not sure what those are sampled from, maybe a movie or something, but they really fit the style of the track well. And one thing that this track does amazingly is fit all these different elements together in one cohesive piece. I think the strongest part of the track for sure is when the female voice counts down, and when she gets to 1, you expect the whole track to just drop in a big way and hit hard, but instead you take a moment and let your main theme build back in, so that real bass drop doesn't happen until the very next bar, which I thought was a really interesting way to build up drama at the end of the piece. I'm interested in knowing about your mixing process and specifically your drum samples, because to me, and this may be an aesthetic choice, which is fine, the drum samples sound a bit like they are not bit crushed, but almost a low bit rate, like when you download a really low quality MP3, which that could really work for the aesthetic here. I just want to make sure that it's intentional. The kick drum throws me off a little bit. I would have chosen something a little more similar to a 909 or an 808 for this style track, but to each his own. In terms of your mixing, I would play with width and panning a little bit more, because it seems like everything is very centered and we could use a little bit more space. There's tons of reverb, which gives us space in that dimension, but we also want the left and right dimension. Don't forget about that. Great submission, Raffz. Very happy to have it on the show. If you would like, please post about your process a little bit more in the community page so we can hear a little bit more about how this track came to be. I'm really interested. Thank you for your submission. Our final submission is going to start a little slow, but I promise you it builds back up in a big way. This is by Noah and it's called This. Let's listen. Alright, that was Noah with This. This is a really cool track, and like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the build-up, and I can really appreciate a nice slow intro like that. That's like very ambitious of you, so thank you for including that. Some artists are a little too worried, I think, to do that, because they want to get the listener interested right away, right off the get-go, and that is really important in today's like social media, music consumption environment, but it is okay once in a while to have a track like this that really builds up. I also like the way you start with a traditional piano sound, which eventually morphs to an electronic piano sound, and then just eventually morphs into full-blown synths. So that was a great evolution in that intro. One thing I would be careful of is your subtlety in the piano track. The same issue we had with one of the previous tracks, really tailor your velocity if you're not actually playing these notes in, because we want to make sure that they're not all at the exact same velocity. We want to add a little bit more of a human element to it, a little bit more of a delicateness that I think you're going for here. Also, before it evolves into a full-blown synth, I would let those piano notes sustain a little bit longer. They're a little short for my taste. A little bit about Noah. He's a 15-year-old EDM producer, and he says that this track is sort of a melancholy future bass track that he started coming up with over the summer and just finished up in late December. Noah's going to be releasing an EP, and we're all definitely going to go check it out for sure and support you as part of the community. Another thing that I really like about this track, and somebody did this on a previous episode, it's using that space between beats 2 and 3 to just let your snare float in the air and to have some silence. I really love that, and it happens a couple times in this track, and I can really appreciate it. Let's talk about this track's structure. Even from looking at the waveform, you can kind of tell it has a little bit of a unique structure. Discarding the intro, you have a bit of a build up and then it drops for the first time and we get that real first hook of the piece. And it builds nicely because it comes in with like those pad synth sounds and then the plucky sounds start to build in, which gives it kind of a two-part feel, keeps the listener interested. Then everything drops out and we have another build up section into another drop. This second drop is not that different from the first drop, which is okay. It's the second hook in a track. I think I'll keep listening to the end because I think something more will come. Then everything drops again and we have a very similar build up into another hook. Instead, the final hook is halftime, almost like a half-speed breakdown. My suggestion would be to reverse those two last hooks. Put the half-speed breakdown in the middle, because once the listener gets there, they'll be super interested because this is brand new to them, this half-speed feel, and that'll carry them all the way into the end. But it is a very unique structure, and I do like that it's not just verse, chorus, verse, bridge. It's sort of like build, drop, build, final drop. My only suggestion would be to put the breakdown before the end, not right at the end. Or you could even do a hybrid where the final hook is starting off as a breakdown and then goes back to that full speed vibe. I also wouldn't be too afraid to add another synth lead at the end to play some new melodic material like a solo or something. Overall, I can definitely tell that this track is part of a collection of tracks, and I can't wait to hear the larger set that it goes with, because I think this will serve really well in sort of a story that your EP is going to be. Thanks so much for the submission, Noah, and we're definitely all going to be looking forward to your EP when it comes out. So you know, all the links are in the description below. You can find all the artists' SoundCloud pages. If you enjoyed the podcast, please give it a like, but also don't forget to go give them love on their pages as well. This podcast is up for free download, so feel free to download it, take it with you when you go. To be a part of this podcast, you need to be a part of the TAETRO community, which is a closed group on Facebook. To get in on the group, all you have to do is message me over at facebook.com/TAETROmusic and let me know you want to be part of the community. The community is built up of like-minded home studio producers who are all just giving each other advice and being a community together. Special shout out to community member Jerry, who is our voice of God on this podcast, and thank you to all the artists who submitted. I'm looking forward to next week. Keep the submissions coming, everybody. It's really been amazing. If you enjoy live electronic music performances, tutorials, and free sound packs, subscribe to my channel at youtube.com/TAETRO. Anyway, I want to thank you all again for listening. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.
Homegrown music from the TAETRO community exclusively on TAETRO Radio.